The courtroom was unusually quiet that morning. The cameras had just started rolling, and the usual chatter that filled the air before every live broadcast had gone silent. A faint hum of whispered anticipation moved through the audience seats, as though everyone could sense that today's case wasn't going to be ordinary. On one side of the courtroom stood Judy, a mother of two, a calm presence with tired eyes that carried both strength and exhaustion. She wasn't used to public confrontations, let alone being on television. But today wasn't about comfort. It was about dignity. Across from her stood Karen, tall, sharp-faced, and visibly proud of herself. The kind of person who always seemed to think the world revolved around her opinion. She carried herself with a smug posture, arms crossed, eyes scanning the room like she owned it. The judge, an older woman known for her patience and quick wit, adjusted her glasses and glanced at the notes in front of her. "All right," she said, her voice echoing through the room, "we're here to settle the matter between Mrs. Judy Williams and Ms. Karen Lewis regarding a personal dispute that escalated in a public setting. I expect both of you to remain civil." Karen smirked. "Of course, Your Honor. I'm always civil." The tone of her voice was drenched in sarcasm, and even the judge's assistant raised an eyebrow. Judy didn't react. She sat still, fingers interlocked on the table in front of her, her expression unreadable. "Mrs. Williams," the judge began, turning to Judy. "Please explain what happened." Judy nodded. "It started at the community event last month. It was supposed to be a charity day for the kids, games, food, just something nice for families. My children were helping with the setup, doing what they could. They're only 9 and 11, but they're responsible. They were just trying to help." Karen rolled her eyes so dramatically that several audience members noticed. Judy continued, "Ms. Lewis here." "It's Karen," the woman interrupted with a smirk. "Everyone calls me Karen." The judge frowned. "You'll wait your turn to speak, Ms. Lewis." Karen leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. "Of course." Judy took a deep breath. "She started yelling at my kids. Said they were in the way, that they didn't know how to do anything right. She told them they were spoiled little brats who needed to learn how the real world works." A small gasp rippled through the audience. Even the bailiff glanced up. The judge's expression darkened slightly. "She said that to your children?" "Yes," Judy said quietly. "Right in front of everyone. My kids were embarrassed. My youngest started crying. I told her that was inappropriate, and she told me maybe if I raised them properly, they wouldn't cry over a few truths." Karen laughed softly. "Oh, come on. You're exaggerating." The judge held up a hand. "You'll have your turn." But Karen didn't stop. "They were in the way. And she acts like I said something terrible. I was just being honest. If kids can't handle criticism, how are they going to survive real life?" The judge stared at her for a moment, the kind of stare that made the air feel heavy. "You believe publicly insulting someone's children counts as criticism?" Karen shrugged. "If the shoe fits." The room fell silent again. Cameras zoomed in on Judy's face, but she didn't flinch. She'd come prepared, not for revenge, but for truth. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Williams, did this incident cause any further issues?" "Yes," Judy said. "After that, she went online. She made posts about my kids, about me. She called us freeloaders. Said I was teaching my children to be lazy. I asked her to take them down, but she refused. Said it was her right to share her opinion." Karen gave a satisfied smirk, as though she'd just proven a point. The judge's tone sharpened. "Ms. Lewis, is that true?" Karen smiled proudly. "Yes. I did post about it. It's a free country. I didn't name her kids, but people knew who I was talking about. If she's embarrassed, maybe she should ask herself why." There was a long pause. The kind that fills every inch of silence and makes everyone in the room hold their breath. Judy finally looked up, her voice steady but firm. "My kids saw those posts. They cried. They asked me why an adult would say such cruel things about them. I had to explain that sometimes people try to hurt others because they're unhappy with themselves. But that doesn't make it right. The courtroom stayed still. Even Karen, for a brief second, looked unsure. The judge folded her hands. Ms. Lewis, do you have anything else to say for yourself? Karen tilted her head, flashing a forced smile. Just that I tell it like it is. If people can't handle honesty, that's their problem. The judge sighed. Honesty and cruelty are not the same thing. The audience murmured in agreement. Judy's composure remained calm, but there was a flicker in her eyes, the spark of a mother who'd had enough. And then, without raising her voice, Judy spoke words that silenced even the cameras. You know, Karen, she said softly, you can call me whatever you want. You can lie about me online. You can insult how I raise my children. But what you'll never understand is that strength isn't about tearing people down. It's about lifting them up. And my children, the ones you called spoiled, they helped feed 30 families that day. While you stood there complaining, they were carrying food to people who needed it. So maybe before you insult someone else's kids, you should ask yourself what yours are learning from you. The room froze. Even the judge paused before speaking again, her voice low and deliberate. We'll take a short recess. Karen's smirk was gone. The audience whispered among themselves, but nobody dared laugh or clap. The silence was louder than any outburst could have been. And for the first time since stepping into that courtroom, Judy allowed herself to breathe. When the judge called for a short recess, the air in the courtroom still felt heavy with tension. People whispered in hushed tones, glancing at Judy with new respect. Even the bailiff, usually stoic, gave her a small nod of acknowledgement as he passed by. Judy didn't bask in it, she simply sat there quietly, her hands folded in her lap, staring down at the table as if replaying every word in her mind. Across the room, Karen was pacing. Her confidence from earlier had dimmed, though she still tried to look unbothered. She straightened her blazer, brushed a non-existent speck of dust from her sleeve, and whispered something sharply to her friend sitting behind her. The friend, who had been cheering her on before the break, now avoided eye contact, suddenly unsure of whose side to take. The judge's assistant called the room back to order. The cameras were rolling again, lights blindingly bright, every eye fixed on the two women. Court is now back in session, the judge said. We will continue hearing from both parties. Karen leaned back in her chair, forcing a smirk. Well, if we're all done with the sob story, maybe we can get back to the actual issue here. The judge's tone turned icy. The issue, as you put it, Ms. Lewis, involves harassment and public defamation. You may think this is a game, but it's not. You attacked someone's children publicly. That is not an issue to minimize. Karen's smirk faltered, but she tried to recover. With all due respect, Your Honor, I didn't harass anyone. I just told the truth. People are too sensitive these days. Judy didn't say a word. She simply turned her gaze toward Karen, calm, steady, piercing. It wasn't a glare, it was disappointment. And that, somehow, was worse. The judge motioned for Judy. Mrs. Williams, do you have any witnesses or additional evidence to present? Judy nodded. Yes, Your Honor. I brought a few statements from people who were at the event. And there's also a recording. Karen blinked. A recording? Yes, Judy replied. One of the volunteers filmed part of the event for social media. You can hear everything. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The confidence she had earlier began to crack. That's not necessary. I mean, it's probably edited. People twist things all the time. The judge gestured to the bailiff. Let's hear it. A small screen was brought forward, and the courtroom grew silent once again. The video began to play, shaky camera footage of the sunny outdoor charity event. Children laughing, volunteers setting up tables, cheerful chatter in the background. Then, the tone changed. On the video, Karen's voice could be heard clearly, "Move out of the way. You kids are making a mess. Honestly, Judy, if you taught them some discipline, maybe they'd actually be useful. The crowd in the courtroom collectively inhaled. Even through the grainy audio, the cruelty in her tone was unmistakable. Then came Judy's voice, calm but firm. Karen, they're children. They're helping. And Karen's voice again, helping? Please. You just want people to think your kids are little angels. Maybe you should stop babying them and let them grow up. When the clip ended, the silence that followed was deafening. Karen's face was pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The judge's expression was unreadable, though her eyes spoke volumes. Ms. Lewis, she said slowly, is there any reason this court should believe that was taken out of context? Karen hesitated. I was frustrated. The setup wasn't organized. Everyone was bumping into each other. It was chaos. That may be true, the judge replied, but that doesn't justify insulting children on camera. Karen's jaw tightened. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. You just said what you were thinking, Judy interrupted softly, her tone gentle but unwavering. That's what you always say, isn't it? You call it honesty, but what you really mean is cruelty without consequence. Karen turned toward her. Oh, don't start acting like a saint. You think you're perfect? No, Judy replied, her voice calm. But I do think that being kind costs nothing. And maybe that's why you never learned how to do it. The audience murmured again. The tension was back, but this time, it wasn't against Judy. It was all aimed at Karen. The judge cleared her throat. Enough. Let's stay focused. She looked down at her notes. Mrs. Williams, you mentioned online posts. Do you have evidence of those? Judy handed a folder to the bailiff. Inside were printed screenshots, several posts Karen had made in the days following the event. The judge scanned them silently. Karen sat rigidly, her lips pressed into a thin line. The posts were cruel, mocking Judy, calling her lazy, suggesting her children were entitled. The kind of things that might get a few laughs online, but carried a real sting when you realized they were about actual people. The judge's tone turned severe. Ms. Lewis, these are not opinions. They are targeted insults. You called this woman's children names on a public platform. You even encouraged others to teach them a lesson. Do you understand the weight of that? Karen swallowed hard but said nothing. Do you have children, Ms. Lewis? The judge asked suddenly. Karen hesitated. Yes. I do. Then imagine, the judge continued, someone saying these things about your child, on television, on the internet, for everyone to see. How would you feel? Karen didn't answer. For a brief moment, her composure cracked completely. Her eyes darted away from the judge, as if she couldn't bear to face her own reflection in Judy's calm expression. Judy spoke softly, I don't want revenge, Your Honor. I just want her to understand that words have power. My children didn't deserve to be humiliated for trying to help. They're good kids. And no one, not even an adult who calls herself honest, has the right to take away their sense of worth. The judge nodded slowly. Well said, Mrs. Williams. She turned to Karen. Ms. Lewis, I'll give you a moment to respond before I deliver my statement. Karen's mouth opened, then closed again. For once, she had no witty comeback, no sarcastic defense. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought it was funny. Humor, the judge replied sharply, should never come at the expense of decency. Karen looked down at her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she clasped them together. The woman who had walked into the courtroom with arrogance now looked small, deflated, even. The judge tapped her pen lightly against her notes, the sound echoing through the silent room. We'll take one final recess before I deliver my verdict. As everyone stood, Judy turned to look at Karen, not with anger, but with quiet understanding. You know, she said softly, it's never too late to do the right thing. Karen didn't respond. But for the first time all day, she didn't roll her eyes. She didn't smirk. She just sat there, silent. And that silence said more than any insult ever could. The courtroom slowly filled again after the final recess. The energy had shifted. Gone was the early morning buzz of excitement and gossip, replaced now by a deep, reflective quiet. Everyone knew the case had become something much larger than a simple dispute. It wasn't just about an argument at a charity event. It was about what happens when pride blinds compassion and cruelty masquerades as honesty. Judy sat calmly, her posture straight, her eyes forward. She wasn't smiling. There was no smug satisfaction in her expression, just quiet resolve. Across the aisle, Karen looked worn out. Her perfect hair had fallen slightly out of place. Her earlier confidence had drained from her face, replaced by something that looked almost like regret, or perhaps the slow realization that she had gone too far. The judge returned to her seat, the gavel in hand. The murmur of the crowd died instantly. She glanced at both women, her face neutral but her eyes stern. "All right," she began, "I've reviewed the evidence, the video recording, and the online posts submitted to this court. What we have here is not simply a matter of disagreement. It's a pattern of behavior, one that began with public humiliation and continued through targeted online harassment." Karen shifted in her chair. Her throat moved as she swallowed, but she said nothing. The judge continued, her tone measured. "Ms. Lewis, you stated repeatedly that you were merely being honest. But I must remind you that freedom of speech is not freedom from responsibility. You used your voice to insult, not to enlighten, to wound, not to help. There is a difference between speaking truth and spreading cruelty under the disguise of truth." A quiet murmur of agreement spread through the audience. Cameras zoomed in on Karen, who sat motionless, eyes fixed on the table. The judge turned her gaze toward Judy. "Mrs. Williams, you showed restraint and grace in this situation. You didn't retaliate with anger or humiliation. You sought accountability, not revenge, and that speaks volumes about your character." Judy gave a respectful nod but remained silent. The judge went on. "Based on the evidence, this court finds Ms. Lewis responsible for public defamation and emotional distress caused to Mrs. Williams and her children. You will issue a formal public apology on the same platforms where the comments were made, as well as on the community network that aired the original footage. Furthermore, you are to refrain from making any further public statements about Mrs. Williams or her family." Karen blinked, stunned. "You're making me apologize, on TV?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "That's correct. The humiliation you caused was public, the accountability will be public too." Karen's lips trembled slightly. She opened her mouth as if to protest, but the judge's firm stare silenced her instantly. Judy sat quietly, watching. Her hands were clasped together, but there was no triumph in her expression. Just calm acceptance. The judge continued, her voice softer now. "I hope this serves as a reminder, not only to you, Ms. Lewis, but to everyone watching, that words carry weight. In an age where people use screens to hide behind cruelty, we must remember that real people live on the other side of those screens." The audience remained utterly still. It wasn't just a courtroom anymore, it felt like a moral stage. The judge set her papers aside. "Before I conclude, I'll allow each party a final statement." Judy didn't hesitate. She stood slowly, took a deep breath, and looked directly at the judge, then turned her eyes to Karen. "I don't hate you," she began quietly. "I know that might surprise you, but I don't. I think you've been carrying anger for a long time, and it spills out whenever someone else is happy. Maybe you don't realize how much damage it does, but I hope someday you do. Not for my sake, but for yours." Karen looked up, startled by the softness in Judy's voice. Judy went on. "My children saw what you said about them. It broke their hearts. But it also gave me a chance to teach them something, that no matter what people say about you, your kindness is never weakness. And that the best response to hate isn't more hate. It's living in a way that makes cruelty look small." The room was utterly silent. Even the cameras seemed to hum more quietly, as if trying not to disturb the stillness of her words. Judy's eyes glistened, but her voice didn't waver. We all make mistakes, Karen. Every one of us. But the moment we stop blaming others and start learning from those mistakes, that's when we really grow up. She nodded slightly and sat down again. The judge took a long pause before turning to Karen. Ms. Lewis, would you like to make your statement? For the first time all day, Karen didn't smirk. Her usual bravado had melted away. When she spoke, her voice was lower, quieter, almost uncertain. I don't really know what to say, she admitted. I guess I thought I was just being funny. I didn't think it would hurt anyone. But seeing that video, hearing it out loud, it sounded meaner than I remembered. Maybe I didn't realize how I come across. The judge gave a small nod. That's a start. Karen turned toward Judy. Her eyes were damp, though she blinked quickly to hide it. I shouldn't have said those things about your kids. Or you. I thought I was being honest, but maybe I was just trying to make myself feel better. I'm sorry. The apology was quiet, hesitant, but it was real. For the first time, it wasn't rehearsed or defensive. Judy met her gaze. Thank you, she said softly. That's all I wanted. The judge picked up her gavel again. This matter is settled. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, echoing through the chamber. The audience began to murmur again, but the mood had shifted. No one was laughing or whispering behind their hands. They were reflecting. As the cameras powered down and the crew began to pack up, Judy stood. Her children, sitting quietly in the back row, ran toward her. They hugged her tightly. Mom, her youngest said softly, did we win? Judy smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. Yes, sweetheart. But not because someone else lost. Karen gathered her things slowly. As she turned to leave, she glanced once more at Judy and her children, the same kids she had insulted. For a moment, her eyes softened. She hesitated, then gave a small nod before walking out. The judge watched quietly from her bench, a faint smile on her lips. Maybe, she murmured to herself, this one might actually change something. Outside the courtroom, the autumn sun was setting. The golden light streamed through the windows, warm and forgiving. Judy stepped outside, her children holding her hands. The day had been long, draining, but strangely peaceful in its ending. She looked up at the fading sky. Kindness, she whispered, always finds its way back. And somewhere, maybe even in Karen's heart, a small part of that kindness had begun to take root. The following week, the entire town seemed to be talking about what had happened in court. The clips from the broadcast had gone viral overnight. People online were sharing Judy's words, quoting her calm composure and the way she defended her children without hatred. Even those who didn't know her were moved by how she turned pain into grace. But not everyone was talking about Judy. Many were focused on Karen, the woman who had humiliated herself on live TV and was now being ordered to issue a public apology. The same woman who had once prided herself on being honest, even when it hurt others. The network scheduled a follow-up broadcast for the apology. The audience filled the small studio once again, the same seats, the same judge presiding over the brief follow-up. But the atmosphere was different. No one came for drama this time. They came for closure. Karen sat quietly at her table. The arrogance that had once marked her every gesture was gone. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in spirit. Gone were the expensive accessories and confident posture. She wore a simple outfit, her expression serious, her voice low when she spoke. Before we begin, the judge said, I want to remind everyone that this hearing is not about punishment. It's about understanding. Ms. Lewis, you've been ordered to make a public apology. You may do so now. Karen nodded, stood up, and turned toward the camera. The room was so silent that even the faint hum of the lights could be heard. I didn't think I'd be standing here like this, she began. I said some terrible things, things I can't take back. I insulted a mother and her children because I thought it made me look stronger. I thought it made me honest. But all it really made me was cruel. She took a breath, her voice trembling slightly. Judy, to you and your kids, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hurt you, and I hurt your children. No excuse I give would make it right. All I can do is apologize and try to be better from now on. She paused, looking down for a moment before continuing. When I watched the footage from that day, I didn't recognize myself. I saw a version of me that I'm ashamed of. And maybe that's the hardest part, realizing that sometimes the person we think we are isn't the one the world sees. Her eyes glistened. So I'm not here to defend myself anymore. I'm here to say I'm sorry, publicly, completely, sincerely. To Judy, to her family, and to anyone else I've ever hurt with my words. The audience stayed silent for a moment. No applause, no murmurs. Just the sound of quiet acknowledgement, the kind that carried more meaning than any noise could. The judge nodded approvingly. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. That was the right thing to do. Judy, sitting in the audience with her children beside her, listened carefully. She didn't cry, but there was a soft sadness in her expression, the kind you feel when justice finally meets compassion. When the hearing ended, Karen approached her slowly. For the first time, she looked genuinely nervous. Judy, she said quietly, I know an apology doesn't erase everything, but I meant what I said. I'll do better. Judy looked at her for a long moment. I believe you, she said simply. Change doesn't happen in one day. But this is a start. Karen nodded. Your kids, they're lucky to have you. Judy smiled faintly. They're good kids. They taught me just as much as I've taught them. As Karen turned to leave, she stopped at the door and glanced back. Thank you, she said softly, and this time, there was no sarcasm, no hidden bite. Just sincerity. Weeks passed, and the incident slowly faded from public conversation. Life went on. The charity organization that had hosted the event received more volunteers than ever before. Parents wanted to teach their children what kindness looked like in action. The community started calling it the lesson of the year, not because of the scandal, but because of the example Judy had set. Judy herself returned to her quiet life. She still took her kids to school, worked her shifts, and baked cookies on weekends. But something about her had changed, not dramatically, but in small, meaningful ways. She held her head a little higher. She smiled a little more freely. She knew now that strength didn't come from shouting the loudest, it came from standing firm in what was right, even when the world was watching. Her children learned, too. They learned that standing up for themselves didn't have to mean fighting back with anger. It meant holding on to their dignity. One afternoon, several months later, Judy was at the park with her kids. The sun was warm, the laughter of children filling the air. As she sat on a bench watching them play, she heard a familiar voice. Hi. It was Karen. She looked different, softer. She had no camera crew, no makeup, just a simple smile. Hi, Judy replied. Karen hesitated before speaking. I just wanted to tell you. I started volunteering at the shelter. You inspired me. I thought helping out might be a better use of my time than complaining about people. Judy smiled. That's wonderful. Karen nodded. I wanted to thank you for how you handled everything. You could have humiliated me in that courtroom. But you didn't. You showed grace when I didn't deserve it. Judy looked at her, her expression kind. We all deserve the chance to do better, Karen. Even the people who've hurt us. Especially them. For a moment, they just stood there, two women who had once been enemies, now quietly understanding each other. The bitterness between them had dissolved into something else, respect. Karen smiled faintly. Your kids are amazing, by the way. They are, Judy said, laughing softly. And they'll be glad to hear you said that. As Karen walked away, Judy watched her go, a sense of peace washing over her. She knew that not every story got such an ending. But sometimes, the hardest battles, the ones fought with patience, kindness, and restraint were the ones that changed hearts, not just outcomes. Her daughter ran up, laughing, holding a flower she had picked from the grass. "For you, Mom." Judy knelt down, taking the flower with a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart." Her son looked up at her. "Are you happy, Mom?" Judy nodded. "Yes. I'm very happy." As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting gold across the park, she realized that life had quietly rewarded her, not with fame or attention, but with peace. And sometimes, peace is the loudest victory of all.